Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Ola Nada, and I'm very honored to be here today and happy to share with you my experience about the responsible conduct of research and active learning in my institute, Faculty of Dentistry, Alexandria University. So this is our building, our very modest building. Over the past year since I attended the first Egypt one. So the outline of my presentation is that I'm going to talk about the workshop and the post-workshop plans and the post-workshop effective. So first the workshop, the research and active learning, it took place on the 30th to the 31st of March. It was a 2-day workshop. So the target group involved 24 participants, and they were all academic staff members from the Faculty of Dentistry, Alexandria University. Regarding their academic background, so it was just the one professor. So it was open to all staff members, including all ranks. However, those who applied the most and those who were accepted the most were the demonstrators. They were 11 in number. They were only bachelor's degree holders. And then 10 assistant lecturers with a master's degree and 2 lecturers with a PhD degree, and then the one professor. Okay, so therefore the age range was mainly in the 20s and early 30s. We have 9 departments in the Faculty of Dentistry. 7 of them shared the experience they were part of our experience, our workshop. So that was very nice. So moving on to the workshop topics. So we had as a topic plagiarism, fabrication and falsification, responsible mentorship and authorship, and active learning. So now I will get into the it was a requirement that I speak about how the objectives, the assessment was aligned with the objectives. So I will just give hints as I go with a couple of objectives of how they were assigned, how they were aligned with the assessment. So this is just a screenshot of the assessment form. So now I will get into each topic and the objectives along with the activity that helped fulfill it, and also the assessment involved. So for the plagiarism, we had different objectives. We had the audience or the participants discuss the definition of plagiarism and imagining possible excuses for plagiarism. That was by brainstorming, and they were asked to classify types of plagiarism, and this was actually confusing to them as they did not really know a classification. And then a fun activity was detecting plagiarism in artwork. So this was kind of something to break the ice. So we had them listen to 2 music pieces, one of which was actually, it was said that it plagiarized the other, but then, so it was basically a song, Stay With Me by Sam Smith. So there's another artist, Tom Petty. The song is I Won't Back Down. So it was claimed that they had a very similar melody to them. And what happened is, in the end, Sam Smith did acknowledge, and he gave partial credit to Tom Petty, that there was part of his music from that other piece, but they were on good terms, and then Tom Petty said that these things can happen. So this was just an example of that, how plagiarism is on a wider scale. It's in our everyday lives. It can happen in everything, not just in research. So then we had another fun activity, determining one's real intention towards research, and this was done by a hypothetical lottery game, where we had the participants answer the question, what would they do if they won the lottery? And what was surprising and what was actually expected was that just 1 out of the 24 participants, and she was a lecturer, she's the only one that said that she would construct a research lab or a research facility, because she's really sad that our faculty doesn't have really well-equipped laboratories. So that was the one person who actually fulfilled the objective of this, was to see that if you have a good intention, you will never resort to fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. If you really have that passion, then you will always stay original, then you will never do something wrong. So that was the whole point behind it, to just wake up and realize the real purpose of it all. Okay, so then we had another activity which we gave them a text out of a novel. It wasn't a scientific, it wasn't something related to dentistry. It was just part of a novel, and we asked them to paraphrase it. So this was just to train them on the idea of paraphrasing. It's since most of them were, like I said, they were bachelor's degree holders, they have not yet experienced something of that sort. And we had it, so it was basically, we had the charts that they were to write the paraphrase text on. It had a hand on it, and those who succeeded in paraphrasing, they were printing in the end their fingerprints on each. So the group is of 5 and 5 fingers. So they just, I wanted to show it to you guys, but it's very far. So maybe I can get it later on. So anyway, so this was nice in the sense that 2 groups were not able to paraphrase at all. They actually just converted what was written in the text in the form of points. So that was not the objective of paraphrasing. So here it is. And we had them using eyeshadow. We had them print their fingerprints. So this was nice in that you should have your own fingerprint. You shouldn't just, it's not the idea that, okay, you're completing other people's work, but you have to have an essence, and you have to, you just get what I don't know how to say it, but anyways, you know what I mean. It was basically just to say that everyone is unique, and even if you're referring to someone else's work, you shouldn't just take it as it is. That was the whole point. So that was another activity. And then we had case studies, and this objective was to develop an expert eye in spotting plagiarism in scientific writings. And how to avoid plagiarism, this was done by an inverted teaching technique, where the participants were the ones that came up with how to avoid plagiarism using their experience. Moving on to the next topic was fabrication and falsification. So this involved categorizing fabrication versus falsification, differentiating between the two and categorizing them. So this was using think, pair, and share, and then deducting possible reasons why scientists resort to fabrication and falsification, and this was by brainstorming. So this is another objective, which involved identifying who is responsible and how to stop the misconduct cycle. So here's an example of the formative assessment. It was in the form of a case study, and it was a pretty complex case study with many factors and many people involved. So it was at a Hawk level, and then the summative assessment was also at a Hawk level. Moving on to responsible mentorship, the third topic. So the formative assessment was just to define mentorship, and that was a Locke level. And the summative assessment was at a higher level, who could be a mentor, so they can imagine from the definition that it says that someone with knowledge, so that person with knowledge doesn't have to be, it's a common conception here that the mentor is always older, so that just proved that it doesn't have to be older. The person doesn't have to be an older person. Okay, so moving on to the second objective, which was illustrating and explaining the responsibilities of both mentor and trainee. So actually in this activity, the participants found themselves very happy. So I realized that people really like to draw, or maybe this group of people did, but they were at their most ecstatic point when they drew. So, and actually dentistry, you can draw a lot of things in dentistry. So this was actually kind of an eye-opener that this can be used in a lot of subjects, when teaching a lot of subjects in our institute. So the participants, of course, they're all staff members. So this was something that we reflected upon later, that they can all use this. Rather than us doing the drawing, then the students will be doing the drawing. It gives them a feeling of importance and a feeling of creativity. So that was a nice one. And we had them vote in the end which drawing was the best. So that was also competitive and fun. How to manage irresponsible mentorship, that was another objective, and this was done through an open discussion of an actual case of irresponsible mentorship that actually took place in February in my own department. And it was a very, what can you say, it was a breakthrough in our department, because it was something that had never happened before. I think I don't have time to discuss it now, but maybe in the questions section, I would like to share it with you. So we just discussed what happened, of course, while changing the names, but everyone knew who we were talking about because it had just happened. And then what to avoid as a mentor trainee, and that was think, pair, and share. Then responsible authorship, the last research topic that was discussed in the workshop, that was on the second day, and it was who deserves to be an author, and that was a multiple choice question in the form of think, pair, and share. And then understanding the role of each author type, and that was the jigsaw puzzle. And this was also perceived as a very interesting activity, and they were doubtful at the beginning that they would be able to explain to each other what they had just learned. But actually, in the end, they gave us really good reviews about how this was really effective in terms of that they really did learn the material. Then they were asked to arrange the authors in the correct order and eliminate irresponsible authors using a strip sequence activity. And then they were asked to differentiate between authorship and acknowledgement through yes or no questions and through the red and green cards. And then the final objective of the authorship was to devise strategies to avoid irresponsible authorship. So we didn't have time to have everyone do a role play, but these are actually two of my team members. So they were actually doing the role play, and it was also a situation that happened last year and it's still ongoing of irresponsible authorship where a person was oppressed and wasn't awarded authorship even though he was part of the research team and had fulfilled the criteria. So they were just playing it out, and so this was the formative assessment, and then the summative assessment also as a Hawk level. Finally, the last session was the active learning session. So this one, the main objective was to reflect on the workshop activities, what have we been doing throughout the workshop. So the entire workshop was the formative assessment, okay? And then we had also a summative, Hawk level summative question at the end in the post-assessment. The next objective was realizing the significance of active learning through hints of Bloom's taxonomy and the pyramid of learning. So we just, it was basically us giving them the information about that certain point. And then we had another interesting thing, which was we had an objective of trying to help demonstrate how passive learning is different from active learning. So to do that, there was this thing, there's this text you can see here. So this is in Arabic, I know that, but you don't need to read it. What we did is that this text is a very detailed one, so it involves a time, a place, actions of certain peoples, places that were mentioned. So this text was to be read to the participants, okay? And they were instructed that they can't take notes, just listening. So we're kind of mimicking what most students do in lectures, how they just listen to the information. So this was the point. So what happened is, before we did that, we asked two volunteers. We wanted two volunteers. So two volunteers, which are these two girls, they were asked to exit the room, and then the rest were listening to this story. And they were, like I said, they can't write anything. So after they listened, one of the volunteers was asked to come back, and then they were asked to tell her what they heard exactly. So of course, you can imagine that some knowledge loss occurred since it's a detailed text and they only listened. They could not write down anything. And then she went back outside and told the other participant, the other volunteer, what she had heard in attempt so that this person, Nancy, would go back in and explain it again to those who told the original story, including the instructor who told it. So anyways, as you can see, it was pretty funny because she lost a lot of information and a lot of the details were gone. So this is of course pretty drastic, but it shows kind of the difference between just receiving and doing, which is the active part of active learning. So this was pretty interesting to see the direct effect of it, and especially that they knew that we are comparing. So they knew that you need to make passive learning look good, but they couldn't because it's still challenging to retain all that information just by hearing. So then we had another objective was to get acquainted with simple forms or tools or ideas to implement active learning. And this was done by our lovely guest, Yıldız, who was lovely enough to come and share her experience with us. So she gave us the professor perspective with active learning. And we also had another perspective, which was actually a student perspective. So this student is actually a second-year dental student. And the reason why he came, obviously, he doesn't have experience with active learning as in teaching it. But he studies at an institute that uses active learning, which is the German Cultural Institute. They use active learning as part of their teaching strategy. And he's a top student both here and there. So he came to, from the student perspective, this is actually, he's explaining on a histology slide. So that's actually my subject. So he was explaining to all the staff members how he, as a student, could learn this particular topic much better if it were in the active learning technique, which he portrayed in the workshop. So the other objective was designing a lesson plan per department using an active learning strategy. So like I said, many departments were involved, so we tried to pair them up as much as possible. So here we have two departments. This is the surgery department, so they devised a plan for that class that were to take place in the coming weeks, and with all the activity and the time that it required and everything. And also this is another department, the dental materials department, they also devised a plan. So now moving on to the topic that I should stress on, which is the falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism in terms of the awareness of the participants. So here I have a scale, aware, neutral, and unaware, color-coded. So I divided them into demonstrators, bachelor's degree holders, masters, and PhD. So first, in terms of plagiarism, the demonstrators were actually unaware completely of the term, which I can imagine since as an undergraduate student we get no exposure whatsoever, and even myself, I never, even after I started my master's, only when my sister was finishing up her master's degree had I heard this term. But the rest were aware. Self-plagiarism, well, only the assistant lecturers were familiar with it, but didn't really understand the importance of it. Perception of fabrication and falsification as an act of misconduct, everyone perceived it as an act of misconduct. However, the significance of the impact of this misconduct, they were all neutral to it. They all saw what's the problem if you do such a misconduct, because it does happen and everyone gets promoted and everyone gets their degree. So this was actually pretty interesting how they didn't notice the significance and they were kind of giving into the idea that you do it and nothing happens, so it's okay. So that was pretty depressing. So this is just a sample of yes or no questions of how their awareness was. So if one uses an idea discussed by two papers, one should only cite one of them. So most of them said yes. And then another one, stopping research misconduct is the sole responsibility of either the first author or the journal reviewers. Most of them said yes. So finally, the tips that were given to the participants to help prevent misconduct. So obviously, honesty is the way to go. So this is something that you can't enforce on a person. One has to self-regulate, since especially our institutes allow some extent, or I don't want to talk badly about my institute, but in general, I mean, they're not very aware of everything that goes on in that matter. And of course, why should you do that? Why should you set self-regulations? Since in the end, you're setting an example to your students. All of us, researchers or staff members, we're actually teaching students, and these students, they still have everything to give, so you need to be setting a good example. And especially because here we don't differentiate between research positions and teaching positions. So you can't just be a teacher. To be a good teacher, you have to be a good researcher. Okay. So also, we told them that they need to perform a thorough literature review to ensure that they're not plagiarizing unintentionally, and also to use the advanced search option in case it's already been done in another language, and also to ensure that you're citing correctly to avoid falling into plagiarism traps. And of course, being concise, you don't need to write a lot, you just need to capture the essence, because sometimes when you write a lot, then you start to use things from other areas and then you fall into plagiarism. And have someone look at your work, particularly a mentor, or of course the online plagiarism checkers, they can be helpful. So the plan for knowledge sustenance, I'll be quick because I know time is running out. So we have a basic research skills workshop that we're looking to plan, since this was actually requested by many of the younger applicants, that they need to know what is research, how to do research in general. So this is like a basic course. And the workshop is planned to be repeated in the faculty and also in the Faculty of Commerce, since we had one facilitator from the Faculty of Commerce, and we have the approval on from the IT head department in the Faculty of Commerce. We also have monthly meetings, so the workshop was in March, so we've only had one so far. So each meeting should hold a different topic. Last one was about critical appraisal of scientific writings and how you shouldn't just take anything that you read for granted. You shouldn't just believe it right away. Then there was actually a funny story about the quality assurance unit. So it started with the day before the workshop. I was setting up the place, and then I found the head of the quality assurance unit coming in. Who are you? What are you doing here? And I told him that I'm planning a workshop. I have a workshop coming up tomorrow. Who do you think you are to do such a workshop? And then he started being really mean. And I started like, oh, no one's with me. I was all by myself, it was late. And then, so I told him, I explained I have the approval of the dean, I have the approval of my department head, and this is official, I have a grant. And then I started, as soon as I mentioned US, then he started, US? What's US? How did you get in touch with the US? Show me. Then he started getting all jealous, so that was pretty funny. But anyways, in the end, of course, I went and reported what happened to my dean and my department head because he kind of violated my everything. He was very scary. So then he said, we talked about how this can be a staff training program. Part of it, as if they don't do a staff training program, which is the funny thing is that he was yani, criticizing and attacking that we took his job and he wasn't actually doing that job, but alhamdulillah, it's okay. We move on. So this is actually being discussed. And then this Alexandria Dental Students Union, so this is the student union for the undergraduate students. So this actually is planning to be a research summer school. This is actually happening inshallah this summer. This will be actually organized by the students and just supervised by me and other lecturers and other staff members. So on a proactive note, it's worth mentioning that on a personal level, we have different departments that are implementing active learning post-workshop. So we have the oral surgery department, the dental biomaterials department, and the oral pathology department, and finally my own department, the oral biology department. And then I'd just like to thank the presentation template provider, Slides Carnival, so that I don't plagiarize. And then finally, thank you for the National Academy of Sciences, and if you have any questions.